Hey, what's going on everyone? Justin again. As always, thanks for watching my channel. Welcome back. Today I'm going to share with you some of my experience with sockets, whether they be chrome, impact. We're going to talk about different types of sockets and how broaching can either help you or hinder you. We're going to talk about 6 points and 12 points a little bit, and what some of the uses are that you would want to use either 6 points or 12 points in certain situations on certain fasteners that are attached to automobiles. So that being said, let's dive into it. Take a look at some new Snap-on 12-point sockets that I picked up and my reason why for picking up the set. Cool, let's take a look. Alright, so I managed to pick these up on Thursday. I was going to share them with you guys, but I got a little bit busy. But this is a very short or small 3/8 drive 12-point impact socket set that I picked up from Snap-on for $100. It was on a promo. It doesn't cover all sizes. Covers 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, and 18. My biggest question to Snap-on was I would have liked to have had a 19 in place of the 18, but that's just me. Just because I've seen 12 points in 19 millimeter on the back of flex plates or flywheels, and it would have been more beneficial for me to have that in a 19 on a 12 point versus an 18. I haven't ran into too many situations where I needed an 18 12 point, but maybe somebody out there has, and they can throw that out there and into the comments and let me know on what fastener they ran into, on what year, make, model, and so forth. But I picked up this small set specifically for those fasteners that are found on the back of flywheels and flex plates when doing clutch jobs. Same exact thing for fasteners on some bell housing bolts you'll run into that are 12 point as well, and you can't always get a 1/2 inch on there, and sometimes the only one you can get in is like a 3/8 on maybe even a universal. I don't have one here, for instance, but I do have a 12 millimeter 12 point on a swivel specifically for Ford drive shaft bolts, because you will run into that, and I don't remember who makes that one. I'll show you guys later down the road. I think it was made by GP, but at any rate, let's talk about these 12-point sockets a little bit. So I decided to pick up the impact rather than chrome, because obviously anytime that you can get an impact wrench on a socket to break loose a fastener, especially in this case for flywheels or flex plates that are on there pretty good, you're going to want to hit it with an impact gun, and you risk damaging a chrome socket if you're using a chrome socket on an impact gun versus using an impact rated socket, because the socket material that the impact sockets are made out of a softer metal, so it's going to absorb the shock from that impact wrench when you're hitting it at such a high RPM using compressed air, or maybe you're using a cordless tool for the impact purpose. One of the things that I like most about the Snap-on sockets, now you guys know that I had said once in the past when I had owned previously a 12-point metric and SAE deep and shallow 3/8 set, that I thought it was a waste of money because that was about $1,000 in sockets, and I do think that that's a waste of money, because you can actually get, and that was all chrome sockets, you can actually get more bang for your buck by buying a cheaper set of sockets. They'll last you for a long time, especially if you're using them as they're intended to be used, such as using a chrome socket to be cracked loose with a ratchet versus using an impact tool. Let me grab something real quick. I want to grab a ratchet just to talk about this a little bit. So some of you may not recall, because you might be too young to recall, but in the earlier days of automotive and wrenching, we had ratchets that only went up to 32 teeth. So having 12-point sockets was definitely a must, because you can rotate the socket, one tooth, and get the bite that you're looking for on it. Nowadays, we don't have to worry about having that enable us, okay? We're enabled because we have 80 tooth ratchet, 72 tooth ratchet technology. So we don't need to worry about like one tooth being like this much, whereas nowadays you move it one little bit and you've already moved one tooth, and that might have been all you needed to get a socket on it. So 12-point sockets aren't really used as much today as they used to be used. But in the earlier days of automotive, when you were limited by a 32 tooth ratchet, Craftsman being the one that I'm referring to here, but Snap-on may have had the same exact 32 tooth technology in that time frame as well. You were limited on the movement of that ratchet, and it made it really difficult to get into certain awkward spots to crack something loose, so a 12-point socket would come in handy. So nowadays we don't have to worry about that because of more modern technology, and you know, better quality ratchets have been built and everything else. Another feature that I like, okay, about the Snap-on sockets versus the cheaper ones. Nothing wrong with the cheap ones, okay? You guys know I made it pretty clear that you can get away with using cheap sockets to get done most anything that you need to get done without having to buy high-end, okay? But I haven't seen too many cheaper brands come out with a good quality impact socket in a 12-point. But even in the chrome to impact, okay, we're just talking about Snap-on here for a second, the broaching and how deep the broaching is on their socket, whether it be chrome or impact, to me is very beneficial in certain situations. And in other situations, the cheaper socket that has a deeper broach might be better to have in certain situations. So what do I mean by that? Broaching being how deep that they actually created the hexagonal pattern, how deep the fastener will actually tuck in. So you can see if I put this, this is 17 millimeter, if I was to put this fastener in, it goes in quite a bit. And that's how deep that broach is on that specific socket, this being a Duralast socket. Now a Snap-on, this is a Snap-on 17, and yes, it's a 12-point, and it is a impact socket. The chrome sockets are manufactured in the same exact depth of broach as the impact ones. Only difference being this is made out of a different metal. But if I was to put the fastener in this, you can see that it does not go down nearly as deep as the 6-point chrome that I have here in Duralast. And the reason for that is because of how deep their broach is. And if you look inside there, I know it's real difficult to see because of the lighting, there's a ring on the inside that's the stopping point for how deep that broach is for that hexagonal pattern. So that's why that only goes down so far, whereas with a cheaper socket, in this case Duralast, but Pittsburgh in the same fashion, the fastener goes down much, much deeper, and that could be an issue for you in certain situations where if you're trying to get into a tight spot and you're limited on the amount of space that you have, if you were to put the socket on and now if with the ratchet on it, maybe you're too close to that heater hose for that specific situation. But if you were to take maybe a cheaper socket, hang on, it's a stiff ratchet because it's brand new. If you were to take a cheaper socket, maybe you can get on that fastener, and because it goes in a little bit deeper, now that heater hose isn't in your way and you're able to actually remove that fastener in that specific situation, or if it's that tight. In other situations, you might need that shallow broach because of that specific area that you're in. You might need that shallow broach because maybe that's where it's the best for you to actually get into and gain access with. And in other situations with the shallow broach, and we'll even go here a little bit further, we'll take into consideration, now I know this is a 3/8 set, but we'll talk about the half-inch set. Half-inch sets have the same exact situation as we're talking here with sockets and how deep their broaching is. Maybe you want to put a lug nut onto a wheel and the broaching is extremely deep on the cheap socket, so you might not have that starting power to be able to start it by hand because it's in too deep, whereas with maybe like a Snap-on socket or Matco or Cornwell or whatever, depending on how deep their broaches are, maybe when you put the lug nut on, the lug nut is exposed and it's only going in as deep as it needs to start threading it. So that's how broaching can come in handy. But at any rate, So those are certain situations that you would run into with 6-point versus 12-point. Again, you know, we're enabled now because of modern technology. We have better ratchets that have more teeth, so 12 points aren't going to be as prevalent in automotive as they used to be. But there are still fasteners out there that require 12-point sockets in order to remove them. Even going back into the earlier 90s, that Pontiac Fiero that I had 12-point millimeter bolts on top of the intake manifold. So you would have needed a 12-point socket in order to remove that intake manifold. And again, we've talked about, you know, drive shafts, flex plates, bell housing bolts, and things like that you're going to run into certain situations where you need a 12-point. In other situations, most situations, all you need is a 6-point. So let me know down in the comment vlog what you think about 6-point versus 12-point sockets and how they benefit you. Alright guys, so that'll pretty much wrap up today's video. Yeah, I was able to pick up that set on promo for $100. I thought it was well worth it, given a certain situation that I ended up needing 12-point sockets to remove various flex plates and flywheels from various vehicles. I figured I'd pick up the short, cheap set. I didn't pick up the full length, every size set. And to those of you that don't know or haven't just coming into this, the video that I did where I said that, you know, 12-point chrome sockets from Snap-on was a waste of $1,000. Hey, look. You spend your money how you want to spend your money. I took those sockets and I gave them back to Snap-on. He was cool about it. Gave me about 80% of what they cost originally. So essentially I got pretty much all my money back from him as trade-in value to go towards tool credit. And I was able to, you know, basically it wasn't a complete waste because I was able to get most of my money back for those sockets. Reason why I got these, I already told you and explained the reason, but huge difference between $100 for one short set and $1,000 for 4 sets. So, and these are impact rated, not chrome. So I picked these up for a specific need and a specific category of what it is that I would be using them for, whereas before I was just trying to upgrade my chrome sockets based on the senior technicians around me. Now doing it for as long as I have, you know, I found that, you know, the cheaper chrome sockets work just well for me. Now, don't get me wrong, the tolerance factor is definitely a factor that most people would take into consideration. Sometimes with the cheaper made sockets, maybe there's a little bit less tolerance and it could potentially round a fastener a little bit easier, whereas with a more expensive socket, like Snap-on or Matco or Cornwell, maybe their tolerances are a little bit tighter, which fit on that fastener a little bit better, and you're less likely to round the fastener. So something to consider for sure, but you know, spend your money how you want to spend your money. Spend it smartly. You know, it took me many years to realize what sockets that I could do my job with and get away with, and I know the various uses and certain situations that I need certain sockets in. Talking real quick, and we'll wrap it up with the impact. Everyone's talking about, you know, how, you know, you should never use, I've seen this in various comments of different videos, you should never use a chrome socket as an impact socket. That is true, okay? If in any situation, if you actually have an impact socket, you want to use an impact socket because that's less likely to damage the socket itself. You're less likely to injure yourself with, you know, if it's a cheap socket and it explodes, which I've heard of people, you know, blasting these things in half and everything. Then you're less likely to be injured by that socket. And the softer metal is going to actually help with the impact. That's why they were rated for the impact rated, so you can hit it over and over. You're going to be less likely to cause damage to the fastener itself. However, I have ran into certain situations in the past where I didn't have a thin wall socket at the time, and I had no choice other than to use a chrome socket because that was the thinnest socket I had, and it was the only way I was going to get a tire rotation done. And I have ran into certain situations where I didn't have any 12-point impact rated sockets, and I needed to get a flywheel off, so I used the chrome 12 points that I had. So there are certain situations and times that you're going to end up using a non-impact rated socket for an impact purpose. It's just the nature of the game. It's trying to get the job done. So Even though I agree, you should always try to use an impact socket when and if available. I'm not against or opposed to using a chrome socket if that's the only thing that I have in front of me. So just, be cautious and get the job done. That's all I got for this video, guys. Sorry if it was a little bit long, but I appreciate it. Thanks as always for watching. Cheers to those of you that have your beers, and I hope you're enjoying your weekend. See you next time.